Morning, everyone. How are we doing today? I am going to attempt to showcase for you a half-day workshop in 50 minutes. Um, but I do want you all to know that everything, single thing I'm going to showcase for you has its own individual step-by-step tutorial that goes along with it. And also, if at the end of this session, if you type in cdwgets.it cdw feedback and you request this slide deck, you'll get it sent right to your email as soon as you fill that out. So all of this is going to be available for you to be able to utilize. And also, after everything that I show or after every slide, I am going to open it up to any comments or any questions. I like to have that happen throughout the entire presentation instead of waiting until the end, because I find people who have a question remember it best at the moment. So we're going to definitely do that and make it as interactive as possible. And also, in case anybody is wondering, all of these sessions are being recorded and they will be posted on the Santa Cruz County Office of Ed YouTube page. So if you miss a session during today or yesterday, you're absolutely more than welcome to visit that Facebook page to be able to see all of the lessons that were recorded through the entirety of the summit. All right, so it is 9:35, so I am going to go ahead and begin. We are going to be talking today about changes in Google Classroom strategies for remote or hybrid teaching. And a lot of these strategies, if you have friends or if you utilize Microsoft Teams, a lot of these strategies can be ported over into a variety of different LMSs. So it's going to be strategies on how to make sure you're communicating best and how you're organizing things in an easy and consistent manner. So that can be ported over into Canvas, it can be ported into Microsoft Teams, but I'm going to be showcasing everything through Google Classroom. A little bit about myself. My name is Joe Marquez. I'm an education strategist with CDWG. My background is in education. I spent 10 years as a science teacher in Clovis Unified School District, and then I moved over into the instructional technology facilitator phase for that district as well. And it was just 2 years ago that I moved from my district into a role as education strategist, where I get to work with districts all up and down California, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado. And my services are a value-added service. So there is no charge for my consultation or any kind of PD that I do with your teachers. But it is a value-add service for you, the business that your school district possibly already does with CDWG. So there is no way to even charge for my services. And I do want to thank the summit sponsors, because without them, we could not have been able to put on this summit or make it free. So we do want to make sure that they do get a little bit of a shout out before we begin. Now, the whole reason that we're having all of these sessions is because of the school shutdowns due to COVID, and then the possible reopening scenarios that we're looking at moving forward in the fall. And these are the 5 top scenarios that my team and I have researched throughout the United States. And California has 4 of these in mind. So California has schools districts looking at business as usual all the way through the adjusted and flexible schedule. The full remote isn't a scenario they're looking at, but they are looking at possibly having to use full remote in cases of school shutdowns or in cases where some positive COVIDs are being seen. So they still want people to be aware of that full remote scenario. And we talked a little bit about these yesterday in my other session when we went over every single one of these in detail. But in all of these details, teachers are going to be asked to teach in a hybrid model. And what that means is whether you're business as usual, adjusted calendar, or on-site remote, you're still going to have face-to-face students, and then you're still going to have some students that are going to be working from home. That could be because of that's what your district has decided. It can also be because you have parents who, even though the school is completely reopened, they may not feel comfortable sending their students to school. So they're still going to have to be learning from home. So teachers are going to have to adjust how they approach an LMS in order to reach all students every single day, but not put a whole bunch of extra work on their plate. So I'm going to go through some of these strategies as well. And everything that we're going to go over, sometimes it can feel overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming to yourself. It could feel overwhelming to your staff. But we have to make sure everybody remembers that it always seems impossible until it's done. The only thing that is impossible for a teacher is giving up, because no teacher that I've ever met has ever given up on anything in their life. And now is not a time to start giving up, because we can do it as long as we work together. The key to this is working as a team, because education is a collaborative sport. And if we are doing it alone, we are doing it wrong. We need to be able to rely on our fellow educators, our administrators, or our district leaders to be able to make a successful return to the classroom possible in the fall. So the first thing I want to ask you is, why? Why are you here? Why does your teachers use Google Classroom? What are the goals of using Google Classroom? What are those goals that you're trying to reach? And how is this space going to have a student impact on our students? What is the student impact we are looking for? In general, in a face-to-face classroom, we love that Google Classroom is a repository of all of our assignments. We love the fact that we can push out a Google Doc or a Google Slide or an assignment, and we can see in real time the students working on them. One of the key features to Google Classroom in a face-to-face environment is you can tell students, hey, by the end of the day, I want this assignment done. And by having them mark things as done, you can see how many students have completed it and how many students still need to complete it. So you can use that as like an accountability tool. But when you have students that are not face-to-face, whether they're working remotely or you're in that hybrid model, or you're having a rotation of students coming through, you may not want to utilize the face-to-face time as work time. You may want to facilitate that as a discussion time. You may want to facilitate that as question and answer time, not necessarily getting work done before the bell rings. So Google Classroom is going to have to change in how we start looking at it. And so these are some of the changes that I foresee. One is the workflow. Traditionally, especially in secondary and junior high and high school, you have multiple periods. So traditionally, teachers have said, okay, I'm going to create a class for period 1, a class for period 2, and a class for period 3, so on and so forth. And that is done because, once again, you want to hold students accountable in real time in the classroom, see who has completed the work and see who needs help. But if you're working with students at home, that model doesn't really hold up. So do we still want to separate by periods? Do we want to put all of our students in one class so it's easier to monitor and communicate with all of them at once? So these are the decisions we're going to have to be asking our educators. How do you want to set Google Classroom up now? Because they're going to have to start deciding what are the pros and cons of changing one class to multiple classes. We also have to make sure that teachers are understanding that navigation must be easy. As a teacher, as a science teacher, I used to post, okay, here's a topic for our daily question. Here's a topic for our labs. Here's a topic for our handouts. I had lots of different sections, and I was able to point them out to my students. Make sure you do this, make sure you do that, make sure you do this one. And it was all over the place. But I knew if my students were confused, they can ask me. Now that's not necessarily the case. So we need to approach posting in a different manner. I always recommend that teachers only post once a week with an agenda of all the things they want their students to complete. And that posting must be done on a consistent basis, whether it's Sunday night or Monday morning, so students are not constantly going back to the classroom to look to see if their teacher has posted something new. And I also recommend that each week is its own topic. So let's say that we started this week. That would be the week of June 15th to June 19th. And everything I want my students to do are underneath that week's topic. So instead of separating them out by different categories, we're separating them out by days of the week. It just makes it easier for students to check and understand. It's also easier for our parents because we know that's going to be a difficulty as well. So we want to make sure if the parents log into the student's Google Classroom by using their credentials, that they can find out where everything is throughout the week in an easy to find manner. And we also, one last thing, we have to make sure there's a consistency across our district as well. We don't want one teacher using Google Classroom, another teacher using Microsoft Teams, another teacher using Canvas, because if you're especially in a secondary school, you're going to have students all over the place if you have a carte blanche of teachers being able to choose. We have to start saying, this is the LMS our district has chosen. This is the LMS that all teachers will be using, just because we don't want to confuse the students. And same thing with parents. I asked parents one time, what is the hardest thing about being a parent of a student in K-12 education? And they said communication, because most teachers say, visit my website if you want information. And one teacher said, I have 5 kids, 2 in elementary, 1 in junior high, and 2 in high school. That's over 30 websites I have to go to each week to figure out what my student needs to do. They said it's overwhelming. And so they wanted an easier to find single location to get all that information. And that's what Google Classroom can be, especially if all the students are using Google Classroom. It's easier for the parents to be involved. So before I move forward, I would like to hear thoughts about this workflow, about this posting on a Monday or a Sunday, about this decision of one whole class for all of my students or multiple classes per period. I would just love to open it up to the group if anybody has any questions or comments or anything at all before we move forward. All right, and you can always use the chat feature. We do have Sage, our moderator here, and if you do ask a question in that chat, we can definitely bring them up. Oh, so I do see one from Josie. Do you have suggestions about how to streamline for elementary teachers with multiple subjects? Yeah, so are you saying multiple subjects, meaning in different classes, or are you talking about different subjects with different grade levels? So I do know that we have some teachers teach 1st and 2nd grade in a combined class. But if you're talking about an elementary teacher who teaches science, math, English, those kinds of things, what I would recommend, I'm going to show this to you, is using emojis to still use that 1 week. This is the week we have to do, but using emojis that represent that topic. We call that iconography. Students are very good at iconography because they are working with emojis on a daily basis. So if in your topic as an assignment, if it's a science assignment, you put a little microscope next to the name. If you're talking about a reading assignment, you put a little book. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to do that right in Google Classroom. And I always recommend doing this for the K through 3 to K through 4 students because it helps them easier navigate Google Classroom, especially if it's the first time they've used it. And as they are learning, it helps them really identify the flow. And hyperdocs work absolutely well as well. You can definitely post a hyperdoc in Google Classroom and have the students go in there and click on things as well. So that could work perfectly. I see Karen. Karen, you raised your hand. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute and ask a question.
Sure. You just asked if anyone had any comments. I work at a middle school, and one of the things that we did was we created a remote learning document. Similar to what you're suggesting, where all of the teachers in the school were listed by grade level with tabs at the bottom. And then each teacher just put on the remote learning doc a direct link to their Google Classroom, and then also a link to their Google Meet, which was just permanent and useful, and there are hours that they would have that. And we got tons of feedback that it was really, really helpful for parents to try and navigate with, especially if they have, as you said, multiple kids with multiple teachers and classes. So that suggestion definitely worked for us.
Yeah, and that's great. Like I said, is that half the battle for this returning to school and half the battle for doing remote as well is making sure parents are kept in the loop, making sure that you're listening to parents' comments and you're listening to your community members, because when they know and they feel they have a voice in these decisions and they have a voice in how this is done, it works out much better with that parent involvement. I always reached out to my parents and said, what is the best way for me to contact you? Do you want me to send you an email? Do you want me to send you a text message? And so I was able to reach all of my parents based on their preferred method of communication. And so if we can figure out a place where all the parents can go at one location without having to do multiple clicks, that's going to be extremely helpful for all involved. And I am going to show you a little trick in Google Classroom that you can have a department Google Classroom and you can share all of your assignments as you post them to your students into this department one. And now all your teachers can borrow from each other with just one single click. I always say, many hands make light work. And that's exactly what needs to happen right now. No, there should be no educator who's doing all of the work all by themselves, especially if you have a really great department. And so whether it's a grade level department in elementary or a course content department like science or math in secondary, sharing with your fellow partners and just having each other being able to pick and choose and reuse what you've already done can be a real time saver and a real great collaboration tool for our teachers. And I am going to be showing examples of all of these as well. So if I can open up my class right here, you'll notice that I do post, just like I said, by week. at the very top. And the great thing about it is every time you post something new, the newest thing goes to the bottom, but you can rearrange your tiles and move them. So you move the newest week to the top so that the students only have to look to the top. And I'm talking about iconography right here. And so all of these bullet points are done through emojis. And so if I wanted to give my agenda here an icon in any Chrome browser, you just right click and there's an option for emoji. And so let's say agenda is a calendar. So all I have to do is type calendar. I see it, I click it, and now it's posted. And now I hit save. And so now my agenda has that calendar next to it. You would do the same thing if it was a science or if it was an English project or reading. Find that icon that kids can identify as a particular subject, and it can make that posting that much easier. Now, when we're talking about this as well, we're talking about the classroom connection. So we talked about making sure that you're posting on a consistent basis on either Monday morning or Sunday night so that you're not posting throughout the week. I also recommend posting agendas into the classroom. And I'll tell you why. Because when you post an agenda, let me bring up this classroom right here. When you post an agenda as an assignment, there's a couple things that can be done. One, you can ask the students, please mark this agenda as done. So if I open up my fake student here and I go into my Freeman Science, on Monday morning, you say, students, I want you to look at the agenda. So they come in here, they look at the agenda, and they mark it as done. That right there, that marking as done, tells you that they've seen the agenda and they don't have any questions about it. And so they mark it as done. So that's the student view. Now, as the teacher, I can now come in here and I can see which students have marked it as done and which students still need to review it. And so this really helps out. See, this is turned in, this one is missing. So I can then contact this fake student number 2 and say, hey, I just want to double check that you looked at the agenda and have any questions on it at all. But I want to show you why this is really great. Whenever you post an agenda, and I always post the agenda for me on Sunday night and give a due date of Monday by like 8 o'clock. They have to have looked at it on Monday. And when you put that due date on it, look what it does. It actually posts right to your Google Calendar. You don't have to do it. Any assignment with a due date, any assignment in Google Classroom with a due date automatically posts to the calendar. You don't have to do anything extra. And if you have a website, if a teacher has a website that allows for HTML or embedding, you can put the calendar right in. So if you're using Google Classroom, I can click calendar, choose my science department calendar right here. And now you can actually see, you can change the way that the calendar looks. So you can come in here and change it from agenda mode to week mode. And then if I take a look at it, this is what the parents would see. So the parents would come in, they see, oh, there's the agenda for my students this week. And they click on it and they can see everything you've asked the students to do that week. And then I always recommend putting a little thing down here called Parent Corner. It's a little note that you can give to the parents, like, hey, parents, here's a quick tip for the week, or hey, parents, here's a quick link to something. So this allows the parents, if they are visiting your website, to jump in here. And if they wanted to, they can add your calendar to their calendar on their phone. And so it'll automatically update them every Monday what their students are supposed to do. Once again, trying to find it easier to push the communication to the parents so they don't have to go out looking for the information. There is, and once again, in the slide deck, I have a step-by-step of everything that I just showed you on how to make this routine. I worked with the school district up in Washington State, and this was the #1 thing they asked their teachers to do when they implemented one-to-one. They said, if there's nothing else that you do, the one thing that is mandated by the beginning of the year is we want you to do the Google Classroom, Google Calendar, Google Site connection. And it saved them a lot of time because they didn't have to then send emails home and post to their Peach Jar or their school wires. It just did everything for them. So that is just a great option to do that as well. And I also have a link to how you can utilize Google, the emojis, step by step. You can share with your teachers on how to do those emojis for bullets and iconography. So before I move on, any questions at all on that workflow, or the reason why we're doing the agenda as an assignment, or how that Google Classroom to Calendar website workflow works? Excellent. And I mentioned some of these tips only because sometimes the way that we do it in our face-to-face is just not as, I don't want to say effective, but it's just not as clear as when we're face-to-face. I can't tell you how many times that I would have to go clarify on my projector, make sure you do this, make sure you do this, make sure you do, like I physically pointed things out to the students. And if I just posted it, they would not have known where things were. And so just being mindful of how you post, when you post, and just make it as easy as possible. One of the things I do want to also share with you is a free tool called Screencastify. Screencastify allows teachers to click and record a message, but the key to Screencastify is this. I think to meet the needs of all of our students, text won't do it alone. We need to make sure we're meeting all the modalities. Some students are visual learners. Some students are auditorial learners. Some students can be that text learner, but we want to make sure we're meeting the needs of all students. So this is what I would recommend they do. After they post the agenda, they click on Screencastify, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera here because otherwise Screencastify won't work for me. So let me just turn off my camera. There we go. And I'm going to hit record. And you'll see it's gonna ask me what screen do I want to record, because I have two screens. I'm just gonna hit share, and it's gonna give me a countdown of 3, 2, 1. And Screencastify allows you to annotate. So I'm gonna say, okay, make sure, students, that you do this number 1 absolutely as soon as possible, because the last thing on the assignment is to do a summary, and I don't want you to have to do them all in one day. So make sure if you have time Monday or Tuesday, do that one first. I really hope so. And then make sure you let your parents know this information, because it's absolutely really important. So if you have any questions, please make sure you let me know. And so from here, we would then just stop the recording, and it automatically uploads to your Google Drive. You don't have to do anything. It automatically uploads to your Google Drive. And this is what you do. You hit copy shareable link, and then you come back to your Google Classroom, and then you add it as a link. And it's right there. So now the students not only can read your instructions, but click here and watch you model those instructions as well. It can save you a lot of time. It can save students a lot of confusion because you're giving the tips on what you really want those students to do. So I highly recommend that you also use Screencastify to give visual directions on anything that you're doing, especially if you're doing maybe work or you're doing an assignment or a project. It'll just really help visually showcase for the students what they need to do, and it can be abundantly clear so they're not guessing. And because we all know, students are very shy of asking questions in class, that they're a little bit more apt of asking questions in a digital realm, but they still may not want to be that one student. I really didn't understand. Can you tell me a little bit more? They might not do that. So being as clear as you can at the beginning is incredibly, incredibly important. Now, what I was saying when we're posting is this. So I'm going to go to my other classroom right over here. And what if I want to post another assignment? So I'm going to come up here and hit create, and I'm going to create an assignment. Let's say that this is called science review. And then once again, if we're using iconography, I can type microscope. There it is. So there's my science review, and I can, give them instructions. I can give them links. I can do whatever I want. But here's the thing. I have another class called department, the science department class. When I'm posting to my class, I'm also going to post there, and I'm just going to hit assign. This is why. So I posted my science review, and I tell this to my fellow science teacher, Mr. Freeman, and he goes, oh, I would love to post that as well. So in Mr. Freeman's class, because I posted that into the science department, and Mr. Freeman is a part of my science department classroom, he can hit create, reuse from the department shared classroom, the science review, and hit reuse. And it will make copies for his students that he can see without having to do anything extra to create this. This is the way that we can share the workload between all of our teachers without having to recreate the process, without sending them an email of what you've done, by double posting to your class and to your shared science department or your shared department classroom or grade level classroom. You're saving a lot of work for a lot of teachers because you're sharing what you're doing. And we all know that we got into education to change the lives of students. And so any lesson that you do should belong to the entirety of the educational world. And so by sharing within our department, we're helping teachers out. And hey, some of these lessons may be new to some of these teachers. We may have some new teachers that didn't even think of doing a lesson like this. And now we can share that experience with them. So I highly recommend that you do create that kind of department classroom. And to do that, all you do is you create a department shared classroom. But instead of them joining as students, you just add the teachers as co-teachers. That's the key part. Make sure they join as co-teachers, not join as a student. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions at all on that? And like I said, in the slide deck that you're going to get by filling out that feedback form, you're going to get an exact copy of this Google slide deck. And every single one of these has a step-by-step of how to do all of these that you can hit pause and rewind and share out as well. So how is that better than adding them to co-teachers as a class? That's a very good question. If you have, let's say, because I had this issue as well. Let's say you have 5 people in your department and you add all 5 to your classroom. Now every teacher is going to have to add all 5 to their classroom. And now you have all of these classes, and sometimes they may be named very similar, and you go in and accidentally add an assignment to another teacher's classroom, and then you don't know why it's not posted in your classroom. So it gets really confusing if you're sharing with all of your department, because you're going to end up with 5 classes of almost the same thing. This creates one class, one repository, and just one extra tile on your Google Classroom screen. So it really limits the chance of posting to the wrong class or deleting something by accident, because trust me, that has happened before. And it just really helps things out. And then the resources, the question on every slide, it's going to be at the bottom. It's cdwgets.it/CDW feedback. You just type that in, fill out that feedback, and you'll get this immediately after you send that in. Now, communication is key as well, because I want to tell you, in class, in face-to-face, students can raise their hand. Mr. Marquez, can you clarify this? Or Mr. Marquez, I didn't understand what you were asking on the science review. All of these questions. But in a remote environment or even a hybrid environment, this is what's going to happen. Let's say you're here. Here's your classroom. Let me go to my class. Let's say you've posted all of this work for this 1 week. And so a student comes in here and leaves a comment. You're not really going to see this comment unless you're looking for that comment. You're not going to see it. So they can post a question on all these different things and it can be lost in the ether. Now, one thing you can do is make sure students are hitting the plus button and then your name. So then you'll automatically be notified. So if they want to talk to you directly as the teacher, they hit the plus button and start typing in your name, and Google Classroom will pull that name for them to hit. And then now they can ask the question and that will go directly to you. So that's a good tip to showcase for the students, but we can't rely on the students doing that every time. So I recommend doing this. Every week, I recommend having what we call a back channel. Now, a back channel is a place that students can ask questions in one place. So for every week, I create something called a back channel. So let me show you how I do this. So I hit create and I just use the material tab. I just use the material tab and I type back channel for June 15th through 19th. And I will say, ask your questions below. And that's all I do. And I make sure I post the topic to that week, June 15th, and I hit post. So now I have my back channel right here. So as a student, I can go into my classroom I say, oh, I have a question on this or that. They click on the back channel, they hit view, and they can leave their comment here. Plus, Mr. Marquez, I was wondering, and this gives one place that all the students are leaving all their questions, so you can check that daily and see if there's anything new. So creating a back channel eliminates them posting everywhere else. Once again, in a face-to-face class, that may not be that big of a deal, because they're like, hey, I posted a question for you, you didn't answer. Oh, I'm sorry, what was your question again? But in a hybrid class, if a student at home asks a question, you may lose it if they're just posting it all over the place. So training the kids, I only want you to post each week in our back channel, can be a really good help as well. Sorry about that's my daughter in the background. Yeah, so the students would be able to see each other's questions. So a way around that would be having the students leaving you a private comment. So under anything, the students could come in and just leave a private comment for you. If I go back here, the student can come into any question over here. And then they can leave the teacher a private comment right there. Private comments are only seen between that student and that teacher. Those are the private comments. So you can absolutely do that as well. Now, once again, these are all text things though. Once again, we want to be able to make sure students have multiple modalities to ask questions, especially our younger students. They may, like our kindergarten through third grade, they may not be very good at typing, but they can be very good at talking. There is an extension called Moat, M-O-T-E. And once again, in our slide deck, you're going to have a link to it. And it puts a little M button on every comment on Google Slides, on Google Docs, and Google Classroom. And this is what the students can do. They click Moat. And they go, Mr. Marquez, I was wondering if you could really tell me a little bit more about the agenda, because I'm really confused. And they hit done. And it'll leave the voice note, and it'll leave the transcript of what they just said. And so the teacher can leave a student a Moat comment. And once again, it'll be the voice. So if I, the teacher, came in here and I saw that a student left me a private comment, I hit play, and it will tell me. So it'll be a voice note right there. So it's really great for students. Now, if the student doesn't have the Moat extension, it'll just give them a link to the Moat page where they can hit play. So they don't necessarily need the extension, but if you want them to be able to hear the note right on Google Classroom or right on their G Suite tool, they are gonna have to utilize the extension, which any IT director or any admin manager for Google G Suite can automatically have that pushed out to any student, so they don't have to install it themselves. It can automatically be pushed. Now, finally, remember I was telling you that students can be typing all these things all over the place. Every time a student leaves a comment in a Google Classroom, no matter what, it automatically goes to the teacher's email. So if I go plus Mr. Freeman, what do we do ... So if they leave this note right here, it will automatically send a note to their Google Classroom automatically, that nothing has to be done. But then it starts getting lost in the either. So I always recommend, so there it is, there's the question from the student. I always recommend the teacher utilize, and now if your teachers are utilizing the Outlook environment and your students are using the Gmail environment, there's a routine to do this as well. But I'm going to show you in the Gmail environment. The teachers can come to the settings and they can create a label. And this label can be called GC for Google Classroom comments. Done. They can hit create. So it creates a brand new tab, and I always color it because it's easier to find things that are in color. So there's my GC tab. And then I also always create a filter. So if it's from Let me actually go into the class to see who it came from. So at classroom.google.com, that's where all of these comments from, and it says commented on. So I'm going to come into my mail settings. I'm going to create a filter from anything from at googleclassroom.com that has the word commented on. I'm going to create that filter and ask, do you want it to be sent anywhere? Yep, I want it to be sent to the label GC comments. There we go. So now whenever a new Google Classroom comment comes in, it'll automatically be labeled and sent to that particular folder. And you can do the same thing with private comments, because it'll be the same thing, except saying commented on, it can say left private comment as the key trigger words. And you can just create another label there. It just makes it easier for the teacher to come in here and go, oh, I got 3 Google Classroom comments. Oh, I got 3 private comments. So that would look like here, a student leaves this, C+, Mr. Freeman, hello. So that sends. It automatically labels it as that label, and then you can come in here and see that comment right there. It just streamlines that communication. Now, once again, if your teachers are utilizing Outlook, it's the same exact process, except they, instead of calling labels, they call it folders. And then it's the same kind of filtering thing. And I do have a step-by-step guide here on how to create those same filters in your Outlook that you can share with your teachers. For me, that just saves me so much time to be able to respond to students if they leave a comment anywhere in Google Classroom, whether it's private or a classroom comment. And it's also great because the same email comes to you, even if they don't hit plus Mr. Marquez, if they're just commenting to another student, you'll automatically see those as well. And you can archive them to see what kind of communication is happening in the background. So before I move on from there, because we do only have 15 more minutes and we have a few more things I absolutely want to show. Are there any questions at all about the streamlining communication, about the back channel, anything at all like that? All right. Has anybody ever heard of Flipgrid? It's becoming really, really popular, and it's a really great free program. And I always recommend as well creating a thing on your classroom, because once again, maybe students don't want to use the back channel. Again, maybe students don't want to leave a private comment. Maybe students want to see your face. Maybe they want you to see their face. I always recommend creating something called 24/7 office hours using Flipgrid. And so to do that, if you've never done it before, I'm going to go into Flipgrid. You create a grid, which you can think of called your class, called Freeman Science, or whatever the science class is. Create the new topic called 24/7 office hours. You can say, listen to the intro. You can leave, you can have it be up to 10 minutes. For this, I always leave it 10 minutes because I never want to stop a student from talking. And I just record a quick intro message for my students to hear. So it says 3, 2, 1. Hi, students. Thank you so much for looking at our 24/7 office hours. Please leave your question and I will get back to you as soon as I can. You hit pause, you hit next. You can review it. It asks for a selfie right there. You can even leave a little text. They've upgraded their text to some phenomenal options. So that's great. So I'm just going to call it 24/7 office hours. I'm going to move that up here and hit next. And then what you do is once that's done, it's going to create your, they call it a topic. You hit create. And then now you're going to push it to Google Classroom. And I'm just going to make it a material. You can leave a description if you want. And then I always create the topic 24/7 office hours, and I hit post. So you can do everything right out of this. You don't have to go to Classroom to create it. And now if I come in here as a student, it's going to be found right there. And so all the student has to do is click, select, and then they can record their question at any moment. We also did this for schools for 24/7 tech support. So we had TOSA departments or ed tech departments, their team monitored this. And if a teacher had any question at all, they would be able to reply back with a screencasted answer. So I highly recommend that as well, because if we do know that there are going to be a lot of teachers who are going to opt to work from home, whether it's because they don't feel that it's safe for them to return just yet, or some teachers have told me, they go, even though I may not be in a category that is deemed at risk, I still take care of my mom or dad, and I don't want to not do that. So I don't want to put them at risk. So I'm opting not to return just yet. So you're still going to have teachers working from home. So this is a great way to have them ask questions without the need of them coming in or having to go through some kind of ticket process. They can go right to the experts in those kinds of topics. And that communication for that 24/7 office hours, the step-by-step process is right here under this Classroom Connection tab. And then also the process to create that back channel is here as well for you. Like I told you at the beginning, I'm going through a half-day workshop in 50 minutes, and it could be overwhelming. That's why I always love to have a pace guide for yourself if you would like to go back or share this with somebody else, because it's step by step. You can go at your own pace and hit rewind if needed. So I always like to make sure that I point that out again. Another thing is, a lot of people are using Classroom Meet or Google Meet. It is right out of Google Classroom now. So if I come in here to my classroom, I can see that Meet is right there. So you as the teacher can initiate a Meet right out of any Google Classroom. And the students can then join that Meet right out of the Google Classroom. So that's a good way of utilizing it. But here's the thing. We have to redefine what it means to do remote teaching. Are you going to do, if you have 7 periods, are you going to do 7 remote teachings all day? Right? What are you going to do for the student who has to take care of their little brother or little sister in the morning and can't attend your session? So what I recommend is this: making sure you're utilizing whatever video format you're using, whether it's Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or Google Meet. Use the recording option to archive whatever you do. That archive will then give you a shared link, and then you could post it into your classroom. So I always recommend that. I also recommend, let's say that you say, you know what? We're going to do one synchronous lesson at noon on Wednesday. If you can make it, great. If not, don't worry about it. It's going to be archived. But if you have 5 different classes, if you use the Google Classroom that comes right out of this Google Classroom, your other 4 periods won't be able to join, because these are linked only to that one class. So what I recommend is actually using, if you're going to do like an all period meet up, you just go out at meet.google.com. You create a meeting here and then post that link to all of your classes. And you can do it with one post, because you can post to all classes at once in Google Classroom. So I would recommend doing it this way, so that all your students can join. But once again, at the very least, record. If you're going to record for period 1 and half your period 1 can't show up, record it and post it so those students can still at least have access to what was talked about at a later date. We are really going to have to be flexible and understanding with our students, because we also have to remember this. If you are alternating days, if that's one of the scenarios where you come to school 2 days a week and are working at home 3 days a week, the parents may be working all days a week. And then they're going to be left to be taking care of their younger students. We have to absolutely be mindful of that. We have to be mindful that maybe they're going to have some sick family members. They're going to have to, so we have to be mindful of that. We have to have heart and patience, and we have to do everything we can to post in as many places as we can, so that they have access to this information. So we just have to be mindful of that. So I just want you to think about, how are you doing your synchronous lessons? Is it accessible to everybody? And what are you going to do for those students who don't? I have a great little thing over here about the 4 ways and 4 reasons you would use the different meets opportunities here. And then I also have a lot of great extensions that you can use in Google Meet. One of the extensions is an attendance tracker. And so just by people showing up, there's an extension that it'll automatically say who showed up. Not to say, oh, you guys aren't showing up, but to kind of get a track of who's consistently showing up, who's not. Are the students not showing up? Is that being reflected in their grade? Should I communicate with them more? So there's an attendance tracker without having you to do anything, and it automatically saves to a Google Sheet, just automatically. So definitely take a look at the top 5 Chrome extensions for Google Meet. And so those are right there. The next thing I want to showcase for you is readability, right? We have to make sure that all of our students can access everything that we post. I mean, our English language learners, our emerging readers, they may not be able to read all of these. And yes, you could record yourself, like I said, through Moat, or you can do it through Screencastify. But what about if they don't speak English as their first language? How are you going to be able to be successful with them there? Well, there is a great extension called the Immersive Reader, and it's made by Microsoft. But if you go to the Chrome Web Store, and once again, the link is in the slide deck I'm going to share with you. So the Immersive Reader Chrome extension, when you add it to Chrome, it will automatically translate any text to any language and read it to the student in that language. It's a really great tool when we do have a variety of language speakers. So if I jump into this agenda here, and the students wanted this read out to them, they would highlight it, right click, and say, help me read this. It will automatically open up in your Immersive Reader. And if they just need help reading it, they hit play. So that's in English. It even has what's called a picture dictionary. So they can click on things and it gives them an image of what that word represents visually. So it helps them read all the way through. And like I said, it'll translate it into multiple languages. So if I come over here to my reading and I want it to translate into Cantonese, they just do that and it automatically will translate that text into Cantonese. And some of them will read the languages and some of them will not, but at least it translates over. And then if you're trying to learn Cantonese, it'll give you that picture dictionary as well, what all those things mean. And then finally, if you're trying to teach your students nouns and verbs and all those things, it'll automatically mark those for you in a certain color. If you're trying to help your students understand what a noun, verb, adjective is, it'll color code them so they can help them out. So the Immersive Reader Chrome extension is a great resource for students who are emerging readers or are ESL learners, English as a second language, and they're trying to still be a part of the class. This is a great way for them to be a part of that. And once again, you can see how to use that in this video here, and the Chrome extension is available for you there as well. And then here's that Moat extension here for you. You can click on this extension, it'll give it to you. And here's a tutorial on how to utilize Moat. And then finally, this is how to create that classroom PLC, that department repository of all assignments. It shows you the reason why we did this, and it shows you exactly step by step of how to create one and invite your teachers as co-teachers in that room. And the last thing I want to mention to you is we have to remind our administrators and our leaders and ourselves that all of the features in the current Google Meet, they're only the advanced features are only available till September 31st for free, and then they go away. So the advanced features are the recording. The advanced features are the noise reduction in the background. Those advanced features are being are allowed free up until September 31st, and then it only becomes part of the G Suite Enterprise for education. So definitely, if the recording portion is extremely important to you, if originality reports, if you have high school teachers that want to do a plagiarism checker, it has free originality reports for all Google documents. So definitely check out G Suite for Education and see if it is a right fit for your district. I have found that sometimes it'll actually be cheaper because a district may be using Zoom and then turn it in. And then that's like ends up becoming $100 almost per student. And this one ends up being only like $24 per student. So sometimes you can actually save a district money because it actually consolidates some of the things you're looking at. But lastly, before we leave, I just want to make sure that the reason for this was to make sure that we are we're allowing that the communication workflow will help parents, students, and teachers easier during this time. We want to make sure that there's multiple modes of communication to meet all the needs of all students. We want to make sure there's multiple forms of feedback, right? So you can use Moat as feedback in Google Docs and Google Slides. You can use Screencastify as that same thing. So multiple levels of feedback. Creating that department repository allows less work for all teachers and allows for great collaboration between departments. And then know when to use Google Meet and for what purpose. Are you going to do it whole class? Are you going to have an opportunity for everybody to join? Because then you'll have to decide which Google Meet option, whether it's through meet.google.com or Google Classroom, that you're going to use for that day. I know that was a lot of information. And I wanted to leave a little bit of time for anybody to have questions, but we only have 1 minute left. But I'm going to be here until my next session starts. It's going to be in the same room. So feel free to ask any questions. If you, once again, go to cdwgets.it, CDW feedback. It'll automatically send you this slide deck with all the links that work and all the videos that work available for you. So everything will be available right out of that link. So any questions, any comments, anything at all before we leave?